A simple act of kindness from a waitress forces a billionaire to face the one thing money can't buy: his son's happiness. The billionaire had built his entire life on schedules, appointments, and important decisions. Every minute of his day was accounted for. From the moment he woke up, there were people waiting for his signature, his advice, or his approval. He had grown used to living in a world where everything was arranged for him: his clothes laid out, his meetings lined up, his food prepared by chefs. Nothing in his life was left to chance. Yet, in the middle of all that order, there was one thing he had never quite figured out: how to be close to his own son. He loved the boy, no doubt about that. But love for him was often expressed through things he could buy. A new tablet, the latest video games, a small electric car to drive in the garden, even a pony once. The boy would smile when he received these gifts, but the smile was quick, like a light that flickers for a second and then fades. The father often thought that maybe his son was just not very expressive. In truth, the boy longed for something else, something his father didn't realize: time, laughter, and attention. That evening had started like many others. The father had returned home late, his mind still buzzing with numbers and deals. His son had been waiting, holding a little toy car in his hand. "Daddy, can we go out today? Just you and me?" The father almost said no. His inbox was overflowing, and tomorrow was packed with meetings. But when he looked at his son's hopeful eyes, something softened in him. He said yes, even though it was unusual. Instead of dining at a private club or a five-star restaurant, he suggested something different, something ordinary. They would go to a small diner in the city. The place was far from what he was used to. The chairs were a little wobbly, the lights slightly dim, and the smell of fried food hung in the air. But his son loved it instantly. The boy's eyes darted around, fascinated by the colorful menus stuck to the wall and the buzzing sound of a milkshake machine behind the counter. It was noisy, filled with families, truck drivers, and students. Nobody cared about who the billionaire was. For once, he felt almost invisible. Their waitress approached the table with a tired smile. She was a woman in her 30s, hair tied up in a messy bun, moving quickly between tables with a pen behind her ear. Her apron was a little stained, her shoes worn out. Yet there was something in her manner that felt warm, genuine. She greeted them with the same cheer she gave every customer. Even though her eyes showed how long her day had already been, the billionaire placed the order without looking up from his phone. While his son asked a dozen curious questions. "Do you like working here? How many milkshakes can you drink in a day? What's your favorite color?" The boy's chatter made her laugh. She crouched a little so she was eye level with him, answering patiently as though he were the most important person in the room. The billionaire glanced up briefly, half irritated by his son's lack of restraint, but the waitress didn't seem bothered at all. If anything, she looked as though the boy's curiosity was refreshing. The food came quickly: burgers, fries, and a strawberry milkshake for the boy. The billionaire tried to relax but found himself pulling out his phone again and again, replying to emails even as his son slurped loudly from his straw. He barely noticed when the boy dropped his little toy car under the table. It rolled far back, right under the booth. "Daddy, my car," the boy cried, tugging at his sleeve. The billionaire waved his hand distractedly. "Leave it. I'll get you another one tomorrow." But the boy shook his head firmly. "No, I want that one. It's my favorite." His voice carried a kind of desperation that caught the attention of the waitress passing by. She looked at the boy, then at the father still glued to his phone. Without a word, she bent down and slipped onto the floor. The boy's eyes widened with surprise as he watched her crawl under the booth, moving her hands along the sticky floor until she found the tiny toy car. When she reappeared, she held it up like a prize, dusted it with a napkin, and placed it back into the boy's hand. Instead of just handing it over, she made it a little game. She held the car in her palm and pretended it was driving across the table, complete with sound effects, before delivering it to him. The boy laughed so loudly the whole table shook. Then, to the billionaire's shock, the boy slid off his seat and crawled onto the floor too, pushing the car along with playful vroom-vroom sounds. The waitress laughed and played along for a moment, not caring that her knees were on the hard tiles, or that other customers were glancing at her. The billionaire froze, watching this scene with disbelief. In his world, no one crawled on the floor. People of his status certainly didn't, and he couldn't remember ever seeing someone do it so openly without embarrassment. He felt a strange mixture of emotions. At first, embarrassment, what would people think, seeing his son on the floor with a waitress. But as he looked at his boy's face, full of joy, he noticed something else. Happiness, pure and unfiltered. A kind of laughter he hadn't heard in months. The billionaire realized he had never been the one to make his son laugh like that. He could buy anything, yet here was a stranger. Someone with no money, no power, no prestige. And she had given his son something priceless in a matter of minutes. When the boy begged his father to come down to tugging at his sleeve, the billionaire hesitated. The thought of crawling on a diner floor in front of strangers was unthinkable. He shook his head quickly, muttering something about how dirty the ground was. The boy's smile faltered for a moment, but the waitress quickly spoke up, her voice kind. They grow up fast, you know? One day he won't ask you to crawl with him anymore. Her words were casual, but they landed heavy in the billionaire's chest. He didn't respond. He couldn't. He simply sat there in silence, watching his son and the waitress laugh together. For a brief second, he felt like an outsider in his own child's happiness. The rest of the meal passed in a blur. He ate without really tasting the food, his thoughts tangled with feelings he didn't want to face. He had always told himself he was doing his best, providing, protecting, securing his son's future. But as he watched the boy sip the last of his milkshake, eyes shining with contentment, he wondered if maybe he had been missing the point all along. On the drive home, his son kept chattering about the funny waitress and how she made the car fly across the table. The billionaire barely spoke, gripping the wheel tighter than usual. He wasn't used to being shaken, but something about that simple moment in the diner had unsettled him deeply. It wasn't about money or gifts, but something much smaller and much bigger at the same time. That night, as he tucked his son into bed, the boy held the toy car close and whispered, "Today was the best day." The billionaire stood in the doorway, unable to move. The words echoed in his head long after the lights went out. The boy could not stop playing with his toy car. He pushed it across the table, letting it bump against the salt shaker and crash into his father's phone, giggling as though it were the funniest thing in the world. His father gave him a look, the kind of stern glance that always made the boy pause for a moment. But this time, his excitement was too strong. The car slipped from his little hands and clattered to the floor again. It rolled under the booth, vanishing into the shadows. The boy's laughter stopped instantly. He leaned down, trying to look under the table, but his short arms couldn't reach. "Daddy, my car!" he said, tugging on his father's sleeve. The billionaire, still busy checking his emails, barely glanced down. "Leave it, son. We'll get you another one tomorrow." But the boy shook his head stubbornly. "No, not another one. I want that one. It's my favorite." His voice was sharp, desperate in a way that made a few nearby diners turn their heads. The father sighed, sliding his phone back into his pocket for a second. He bent forward slightly, but didn't even try to crawl down. The floor looked dirty, and the idea of kneeling on it was unthinkable to him. He was about to call one of the staff over to fetch it when the waitress passed by again. She saw the boy's worried face and paused immediately. "What happened, buddy?" she asked with a smile. "My car fell," the boy said softly, pointing under the table. "Oh, let's go get it then," she said without hesitation. Before the father could say a word, she crouched and disappeared under the table. The sound of her shoes scuffing against the tiles echoed softly. And then her voice came, playful and light. "Oh, where are you hiding, little car?" The boy giggled, peeking under the tablecloth as though watching a show. A moment later, the waitress popped back up, triumphantly holding the car in her hand. She had a little smudge of dust on her apron, but she didn't care. Instead of just handing it back, she held it at the edge of the table and made a vroom vroom noise. Pretending it was zooming across the tabletop, the boy clapped his hands in delight. His laughter rang through the diner, brighter and louder than anything his father had heard in months. The waitress let the car drive around the ketchup bottle, do a little spin near the napkin holder, and then finally deliver itself into the boy's waiting hands. The boy was so thrilled he didn't stay in his seat. He slid down from the booth and dropped to his knees, pushing the car along the floor, making his own sound effects. Vroom, crash. Vroom. His little body moved across the tiles without a single thought of how it looked to others. For him, it was just fun. The billionaire stiffened. He could feel eyes on them, strangers watching his son crawl on the diner floor like a toddler. His instinct was to pull him up immediately, scold him for acting out of place, and remind him that they were in public. But before he could say anything, the waitress laughed and crouched down again, joining the boy. She put her hands on the floor and crawled alongside him, making silly car noises with exaggerated energy. The boy screamed with joy. He pushed his toy car faster, trying to outrun her imaginary one. She kept up playing as though nothing else mattered in the entire world. Her knees pressed against the hard floor, her apron brushing against the dirty tiles. Yet she looked happier in that moment than she had while serving dozens of tables. The father sat frozen. His expensive suit, his polished shoes, his guarded pride, they all felt out of place in that simple, genuine scene unfolding before him. He had never imagined anyone, especially a stranger, would crawl on the floor in a public place just to make his son laugh. The boy looked up, his eyes shining. "Daddy, come down. Play with us." He patted the floor eagerly, waiting for his father to join. The billionaire's chest tightened. He shook his head quickly, his voice low. "No, son. The floor is dirty. Sit back up." The boy's smile faltered for the first time. His toy car slowed down in his hands. A small silence fell between them, heavy and awkward. But then the waitress leaned closer and whispered to the boy, loud enough for the father to hear too. "Hey, don't worry. Grown-ups sometimes forget how to play. But you keep playing, okay? You're the boss of your toy car, not them." The boy grinned again, reassured, and pushed his car faster. His laughter returned, echoing through the diner. The waitress joined in, letting out playful racing sounds. Other customers began to smile, some even chuckling softly at the sight. It wasn't mockery, it was admiration, kind of warmth that spread across the room. The father, however, felt heat rise to his face. Part of him wanted to leave immediately, to escape the eyes of strangers. But another part of him, a quieter part he rarely listened to, couldn't look away from his son's joy. It was real, pure, and unfiltered. He realized with a sting that he had never been the one to bring that out of his boy. The waitress finally stood up, brushing her apron with a laugh. "There you go, champ. Keep that car safe this time." She ruffled the boy's hair gently before heading off to another table. The boy climbed back into the booth, cheeks flushed from excitement. "Daddy, did you see? She made the car fly. She's so fun." The billionaire forced a small smile, but inside, he felt unsettled. He had thought joy came from the things he could provide: the best schools, the most expensive toys, the safest environment. Yet a stranger, with nothing but kindness and a willingness to kneel down on a dirty floor, had given his son more happiness in a few minutes than he had managed in years. The rest of the meal passed. But the father's appetite was gone. He barely touched his food, his mind circling the image of the waitress crawling beside his son. Every time he looked at the boy's glowing face, he was reminded of his own refusal, his own distance. On the way home, the boy chattered endlessly about the game. He replayed every sound effect, every silly move the waitress had made, giggling at his own retelling. She wasn't even scared to crawl, Daddy. And she didn't care if people watched. She just wanted to play. "Can we come back here tomorrow?" The father gripped the steering wheel tightly, his jaw clenched. He gave a vague answer, something about being busy, but the words barely left his lips. His son's laughter filled the car, but behind it, the billionaire felt a sharp ache in his chest. Later that night, as he stood outside his son's room, he heard the boy softly pushing the toy car across the carpet, whispering to himself. Vroom, vroom. The sound was gentle, happy, unburdened. The billionaire leaned against the doorway, staring at the small figure on the floor. The image of the waitress flashed again in his mind, a smudge of dust on her apron. The way she had smiled without hesitation. The way she had given her full attention to his son, it seemed like such a small thing. Yet it had changed everything in that diner. And though he didn't want to admit it, he knew deep inside that something had shifted in him too. The billionaire could not sleep that night. He tossed and turned in his huge bed, surrounded by silence that usually comforted him, but now felt heavy. His mind kept going back to the scene at the diner, the waitress crawling on the floor without a single care, the way his son's laughter had filled the room, and his own refusal to bend down when his son begged him to join. He told himself it was because the floor was dirty. So he was protecting his suit because it wasn't proper for a man like him. But deep down, he knew the truth. He had been afraid. Afraid of looking foolish. Afraid of being seen as anything less than powerful. Afraid of lowering himself. And what had that fear cost him? A chance to make his son laugh. A chance to share a memory that could never be replaced. His chest ached when he remembered the disappointed look on the boy's face when he had said no. The smile had slipped for only a moment, but it was enough to haunt him. The waitress's words echoed again in his mind. They grow up fast. One day he won't ask you to crawl with him anymore. At the time, he had brushed it off as nothing, but now it sounded like a warning. He thought of all the birthdays he had missed because of business trips. The soccer games he had never attended. The times he had promised to read a bedtime story, but ended up working late instead. One day his son would stop asking. One day he wouldn't tug at his sleeve or beg him to play. One day it would be too late. The billionaire sat up in bed, pressing his hands against his face. He had always believed he was doing his best. He had given his son security, education, everything a child could need. But as he sat in the darkness, he realized he had given so little of himself. He was like a man who poured gold into a box but never opened it to see if there was any light inside. His son didn't want gold. He wanted him. The next morning, he tried to push the thoughts away. He dressed in his expensive suit, tied his perfect tie, and walked into his office building with his usual air of control. Meetings went on as always, charts and numbers flashing on screens, assistants rushing in and out with files. But no matter what was said, his mind kept drifting back. He saw the waitress's smile, the way she had looked at his son, as though he were the only person who mattered. He saw his son's small hands pushing the toy car, his laughter filling the diner. During one meeting, he found himself staring at his reflection in the glass wall. His face was sharp, his expression controlled, but his eyes looked tired. For years he had built walls around himself, protecting his image, his reputation, his power. But what had those walls done, except keep him away from the one person he should be closest to? When he returned home that evening, his son was sitting on the carpet in the living room, pushing the toy car around in circles. The boy looked up and smiled, but it was a small smile, not the wide, unguarded grin from the diner. "Hi, Daddy," he said quietly. The billionaire stood in the doorway, his briefcase still in his hand. He wanted to say something, but the words wouldn't come. He wanted to kneel down, to join his son on the floor right then and there. But again, something inside him stopped him. Pride, fear, hesitation. It was like an invisible chain holding him back. He nodded stiffly and walked past into his office, the boy's smile fading as he went. That night, he sat at his desk, pretending to work, but he couldn't focus. The image of his son crawling happily on the diner floor kept burning in his mind. The boy had wanted him there, wanted to share that joy with him, and he had refused. He felt a deep shame he wasn't used to feeling. He had always been the man who made the right choices, who knew what mattered most. But now he realized he didn't even know what mattered in his own home. He thought of his own childhood. His father had been stern, always busy, always distant. He had grown up in a house filled with wealth, but empty of warmth. He had told himself he would never be like that. And yet here he was repeating the same mistakes. He was becoming the man he had once promised never to be. He pushed back his chair and walked to his son's room. The boy was asleep, curled up under his blanket, the toy car resting beside his pillow. The billionaire stood there for a long time, watching his small chest rise and fall. He wanted to wake him, to whisper that he was sorry, to promise that things would be different. But he didn't. Instead, he quietly sat down on the edge of the bed and stayed there, listening to his son's soft breathing. For once, he allowed himself to feel the silence, not fill it with work or distractions. The waitress's words returned once more, sharper this time, cutting through his chest. They grow up fast. He realized she had not only been speaking to his son, she had been speaking to him too. She had seen what he couldn't. She had seen how much he was losing without even noticing. The following days, the thought followed him everywhere. In the car, in meetings, even when people were speaking directly to him, he drifted back to that moment at the diner. He began to notice little things he had ignored before his son's drawings left on the kitchen counter. The way the boy looked out the window waiting for him to come home, the small sigh when he was late again. Each detail cut into him like a blade. For the first time in years, he questioned everything. What was the point of all his success if he couldn't share it with the one person who mattered most? What was the point of building empires if he couldn't build memories with his son? The image of the waitress crawling on the floor had become a mirror, showing him who he was and who he could be. One evening, his son asked him again, "Daddy, can you play with me?" The boy's voice was soft, almost hesitant, as though he already expected the answer to be no. The billionaire's heart squeezed painfully. He opened his mouth, ready to make an excuse about work, but stopped. He looked at his son's hopeful eyes, and for a moment, the walls around him cracked. He still didn't join him on the floor that night, but he sat a little closer, watching him play. It was a small step, but it was something. He knew he couldn't keep living like this. Something had to change. He couldn't ignore the truth any longer. The waitress had shown him, without even realizing it, that real strength wasn't about staying above others. It was about having the courage to kneel down, to meet someone at their level, to give a piece of yourself without worrying about pride. As he turned off the lights that night, he made a silent promise to himself. He didn't know how yet, but he would find a way to break free from the walls he had built. He would find a way to give his son the father he deserved. Not just the provider, not just the man with money and power, but the man who could crawl on the floor and laugh with him, and though he didn't say it out loud, he whispered in his heart, "Thank you, waitress. You showed me what I couldn't see." The billionaire woke up that morning with a new determination. The night before, he had spent hours thinking about his son, about the missed moments, about the laughter at the diner, and about how the waitress had shown him something he had forgotten long ago. Today would be different. Today, he would take a small, personal risk, but one that could change everything between him and his son. He walked into the living room where his son was already awake, bouncing on the sofa with the toy car in his hands. "Good morning, buddy," he said, trying to keep his voice light. The boy looked up, surprised to see his father so cheerful. "Morning, Daddy. Can we play today?" "Yes," the billionaire said, almost whispering it to himself. "Yes, we can play today." There was a pause, then a shy smile appeared on the boy's face. He didn't know what to expect from his father, who was always busy, always serious, always so distant. Instead of setting up a board game or a tablet, the billionaire suggested something unusual. "Let's go outside. Bring your car." His son's eyes lit up instantly. "Outside?" he asked, excitement bubbling over. "Yes, outside," the father said. "Just you and me. No phones, no work, nothing else. Just us." The park was quiet in the early morning, the sun casting golden light over the grass. The boy ran ahead, pushing his toy car along the path. He laughed, the sound pure and carefree, as birds chirped around them. The billionaire followed, keeping a steady pace. But every few steps, he thought about what he was about to do. Finally, they reached an open patch of grass. The boy dropped to his knees and started racing the toy car back and forth. The billionaire stood for a moment, watching. His mind told him to maintain control, to act composed, to stay above the silliness. But then he remembered the diner, the crawling waitress. The way she had made his son laugh, the way she had reminded him that joy often requires leaving pride behind. With a deep breath, he bent down. The grass was rough on his hands, the morning dew dampened his suit, but he didn't care. "Ready, buddy?" he asked. The boy's eyes widened with disbelief. "You're going to play with me?" "Yes," the billionaire said, smiling despite himself. "I'm going to play with you." He pushed his toy car forward, making a dramatic vroom-vroom noise. The boy laughed uncontrollably, crawling faster to beat him. The father laughed too, a sound he hadn't heard from himself in years. His suit got dirty, his hands scraped, but nothing mattered. This was real. This was the first time he was truly present with his son. For a while, they raced their cars across the grass, spinning in circles, crashing into imaginary obstacles, and creating their own little world. The boy's laughter grew louder, echoing through the park, and the billionaire felt something he hadn't in a long time: freedom. Freedom from judgment, from appearances, from the constant pressure of status. He realized that he had been living in a cage of his own making, thinking that power and money were the most important things, while the real treasures had been right in front of him all along. Other parents in the park started to notice. Some recognized him immediately, whispering among themselves. A few children pointed, curious about the man crawling and laughing on the grass. For the billionaire, none of that mattered. He was no longer the man everyone expected him to be. He was a father, fully present, fully engaged, and finally fully human. His son clapped his hands and cheered. "Daddy, watch this. My car jumps over the big rock." He pushed the toy car along a tiny incline and watched it tumble. The father followed, laughing, pretending to be shocked at the fall. "Oh no, my car. You're too fast for me," he shouted dramatically. The boy collapsed on the grass, giggling uncontrollably, and the billionaire joined him, lying down on the ground, catching his breath between laughs. For the first time, he felt a real connection. Not the connection built on gifts or schedules or security, but a connection built on shared joy. He understood now what the waitress had shown him in the diner. It wasn't just about playing or crawling, it was about meeting his son where he was, seeing the world through his eyes and letting go of all the walls he had built around himself as they played. He began to notice things he had never seen before: the small dandelions pushing through the cracks in the path, the way the sunlight glinted off his son's hair, the soft rustle of the leaves in the wind. He realized that he had been blind for so long, focused on achievements and money, while life's simple beauty had passed him by. The boy suddenly paused and looked up at him. "Daddy, you're really playing." "I thought maybe you forgot how." The billionaire smiled, brushing a piece of grass off his suit. "I didn't forget," he said softly. "I just needed a little reminder." They continued for hours racing their cars, inventing stories about them, and sometimes just lying on the grass, staring at the clouds and pointing out shapes. The boy asked questions about everything: why the clouds moved, why the wind sounded different today, why birds chirped louder in the morning. The father answered, not with hurried explanations or business-like efficiency, but with patience and curiosity. For the first time, he felt like he was learning from his son as much as he was teaching him. Eventually, they walked back home, hands intertwined. The boy chattered about everything that had happened, every imaginary race, every laugh, every crash. The billionaire listened, truly listening, and realized that the day had changed him. He understood now that the real value of life wasn't in the deals he closed, or the money he earned. It was in these small, fleeting moments, in the laughter of a child, in the freedom to let go of pride and simply be present. That evening, he tucked his son into bed, brushing the hair from his forehead. "I had fun today, Daddy," the boy said, his eyes shining with happiness. "Me too," the father whispered, feeling tears threaten behind his eyes. "Me too." For the first time in a long time, he felt whole. He knew that life would continue to demand his attention and energy, but he also knew he had discovered something irreplaceable. He had discovered presence, connection, the joy of truly being a father. And in the quiet moments that night, lying awake in his own bed, he thought of the waitress again. Her small act, crawling on the diner floor to make his son laugh, had opened a door inside him. She had reminded him that courage wasn't always about grand gestures. It could be as simple as bending down, playing and showing love without fear. He smiled to himself, a small but real smile, feeling the warmth of a lesson learned, a bond strengthened, and a future that could finally be different. The billionaire woke up feeling different that morning. There was a lightness in his chest he hadn't felt in years. Yesterday's play in the park with his son still echoed in his mind the laughter, the toy cars, the grass-stained suit, and most of all, the joy on his son's face. It had been more than just a game. It had been a lesson. For the first time, he understood what he had been missing in his son's life. And he knew he couldn't let it happen again. He walked quietly into his son's room. The boy was awake, building a small tower of blocks on the carpet. When he saw his father, his face lit up with a smile. "Daddy, are we going to play again today?" he asked eagerly. The billionaire nodded, kneeling down beside him this time without hesitation. The boy's eyes widened in surprise, and then he grinned. Pushing a block toward his father, they spent the morning playing with blocks, racing toy cars, and reading picture books on the floor. Every laugh, every giggle, every small moment felt like treasure. The billionaire realized that these were the moments he had been searching for all. His life moments that money could never buy. Later, he told his son, "Let's do something special today. Let's visit the diner again." The boy's eyes sparkled. "The one with the nice waitress?" he asked. "Yes," the father said. "She taught me something important. I want to thank her and also show her that I'm learning too." When they arrived, the diner was busy but familiar. The waitress recognized them immediately and smiled warmly. "Back again," she said cheerfully. "And you brought your dad too?" The boy ran ahead to greet her, and the billionaire followed slowly. Taking a deep breath, he approached her, clearing his throat. "I wanted to thank you," he said, "for the other day, for showing me something I had forgotten. That little moment you, crawling on the floor with my son at, reminded me what really matters." The waitress looked surprised, then smiled softly. "It was nothing, really," she said. "I was just trying to help your son and have a little fun." He shook his head. "It was everything. It made me realize how much I had been missing. You reminded me to be present, to play, to connect." He felt a weight lifting from his chest, a relief that he had finally acknowledged the truth. The waitress's eyes softened. "I'm glad," she said simply. "It's amazing what a small moment can do." After leaving the diner, the billionaire and his son walked through the park again. This time, the father took the lead, pushing the toy car, crawling alongside his son. And laughing without concern for how he looked. Every step, every laugh, every shared look deepened the bond that had been distant for far too long. He felt younger, freer, more alive. At home, he began making small but significant changes. He set aside time each day just for his son, refusing to let work intrude. Meetings that could wait were postponed. Calls that could be handled by assistants were left to them. The billionaire realized that nothing was more important than being fully present for his child. In the evenings, they played board games, built forts out of blankets and chairs, and read bedtime stories with dramatic voices and laughter echoing through the rooms. The boy's school reports, which had been full of comments about his father being absent, started to improve in spirit and attention. Teachers noticed a difference in the child's happiness and engagement. The billionaire also began to notice changes in himself. He laughed more freely, smiled without thinking twice, and appreciated simple things he had long ignored: the sunlight through the window, the way his son's hair shone in the evening light, the soft rhythm of rain tapping against the roof. Each small thing became a reminder that life's value wasn't measured by power or possessions, but by the moments shared and the love given. One afternoon, he returned to the diner alone. He wanted to express his gratitude fully. He found the waitress wiping tables and walked up to her. "I just wanted to say thank you again," he said. "You might not know it, but you changed something important in me. You showed me that humility, patience, and kindness can teach lessons no money can buy." The waitress blinked, clearly taken aback. "I didn't do anything special," she said softly. He smiled warmly. "You did. You reminded me that life isn't about standing above others. It's about being present, sharing moments, and letting go of pride. My son and I were closer now because of that day. I'll never forget it." She smiled back, this time with quiet pride. "I'm happy for you. That's all that matters, back home." The billionaire and his son sat together in the living room, the toy cars scattered across the carpet. They raced them side by side, crawled along the floor, and laughed until their stomachs hurt. The room was filled with joy, a sound that had been rare in the billionaire's life. He watched his son's face, noticing the way his eyes sparkled with pure happiness, and he realized he had finally found a kind of wealth that money could never provide. That evening, after the boy had fallen asleep, the father sat alone on the carpet, reflecting on everything that had happened. He thought of the diner, the waitress, and the moment on the floor that had changed everything. He realized that life would continue to be busy, full of meetings and responsibilities. But now he understood that the most important moments were the ones he chose to spend with his son. He quietly whispered to himself, "I won't let these moments pass by anymore. I'll be here fully, for him." The billionaire had been transformed. He had learned that humility and presence were more powerful than money or status. He had discovered that real love meant showing up, sharing laughter, and valuing the small things. And as he looked at his sleeping son, he knew that he had finally begun to be the father his child truly needed. From that day forward, their lives were different. Playtime became sacred. Mornings were filled with shared stories, and evenings echoed with laughter. The billionaire's heart had opened, and he felt a peace he had never known. He understood that real wealth was not counted in bank accounts or properties, but in moments of connection, love, and joy shared with the people who mattered most. He smiled to himself, thinking of the waitress one last time. A simple act, a small moment of kindness, had changed his life forever. It had reminded him that the greatest gift a parent can give is presence, laughter, and love. And with that, he finally felt whole.